Hi YouTube, this is Show Me Cannabis Executive Director John Payne. This week on the podcast, we're going to be discussing the economic impact of cannabis legalization on Missouri. Incidentally, before I took this job, I used to work for an economics think tank, and before that, I used to teach high school economics. So this is sort of my specialty. Missouri can benefit economically from the legalization of cannabis in a number of different ways. First of all, it seems that there would be about $1 billion industry in cannabis if it were legalized in the state of Missouri. That's according to numbers released by the state auditor's office that we could realize $217 million in new tax revenues every year if cannabis were legalized and taxed at about the same rate as Colorado is currently doing. And that means $1 billion industry of new jobs, and also it doesn't even take into account all the taxes that people will be paying, local sales tax, licensing fees, etc. So we're talking about a lot of money that can be going into our economies, into our tax coffers at both the local and state levels. And that's also not even taking into account the industrial hemp market, which currently in the United States, people buy $500 million of industrial hemp every year. However, that money is exported to other countries because our farmers are not currently allowed to grow hemp. Missouri was, before it was outlawed, one of the leading hemp-producing states in the Union. We could be that again and get in on that $500 million market and make that market grow. Prohibition in Missouri costs $90 million in tax dollars every year. That's according to a study by Jeff Myron of Harvard University, an economics professor there who worked on the subject a couple years ago. And that's money that is just spent on arrests, prosecutions, and incarcerations of those convicted of cannabis offenses. That doesn't take into account the long-term economic consequences of a cannabis arrest. If a person gets a permanent criminal record because of cannabis, they will find it harder to get a good education, find it harder to get a job, and that is a long-term drag on our economy. It's harder to measure those effects, but it's certainly in the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. Another way that cannabis could benefit Missourians economically is providing a cheaper alternative to many expensive pharmaceutical products. Pharmaceutical therapies can cost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars every month to treat one illness. Cannabis could replace many of those and provide families with an alternative. Medical costs are one of the largest expenses for Missouri families and one of the leading causes of bankruptcy. Shouldn't Missouri families have an alternative that is cheaper? Cannabis legalization has already proven to be a boon for other states, particularly Colorado, where they've had a legalized industry for 6 months now. There's already been $25 million in tax revenue collected and about $70 million that is expected to be collected by the end of the fiscal year. In fact, if they collect over that, Colorado officials are discussing returning some of that money to state taxpayers. They've also benefited by an increase in tourism. A substantial amount of the tax dollars seems to be coming from out of state, and in fact they've done studies on an increased number of people flying from other markets, including Kansas City and St. Louis, to Denver at the beginning of the year, and not just to go skiing, but to go check out the new legal cannabis industry there. In Colorado, some farmers are even using leftover parts of the cannabis plant as feed for livestock, such as pigs. And this seems to, not surprisingly, stimulate those animals' appetites and make them gain a little bit more weight. So pigs that are fed this in Colorado seem to be coming in at about 20 pounds heavier per head. That's something that in Missouri, where we raise a substantial number of pigs, that we could benefit from as well here. Governor Nixon signed a bill allowing for the production of hemp oil to treat epilepsy the beginning of this last week. And that bill has been received well across the state. And in fact, the Post-Dispatch ran an editorial on how this could pave the way for broader medical and full legalization reforms. And they argue that it could help revitalize our economy. I'd like to quote from that article just if I may. The hemp oil bill will help dozens, maybe hundreds of children who need comfort from debilitating seizures. That's a good thing. But it also has the potential to lay the groundwork for an agricultural and economic revival in Missouri based on the libertarian principles which so many of today's Missouri Republicans claim to subscribe. Let's have that conversation, and like the Bush Clan of the early 20th century, be ready to claim the economic spoils of the post-Prohibition era. That is absolutely sound advice, and I hope that our state will take it. Thank you.